time. I'm going to give it a... Hello and welcome to Into the Liminal Abyss. I am Sasquatch Noir, your host, and today I am talking to Cliff from Finding Bigfoot, or at least that's how everybody knows him most of the time.
You chickened out. You should have said my last name.
I was going to, but everybody's like,
How do you pronounce it? I don't know.
Who? Cliff from Finding Bigfoot, okay? That's who we're talking to. So now that everybody knows, hi Cliff.
Hi.
Hi. So the last time I talked to you was at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. You were emceeing. And the cool part of that conversation was not the Bigfoot, but the fact that you said you were interested in researching river monsters, which happens to be my field of expertise. So that's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like all things weird and unusual, and river monsters just kind of falls in that bin. I happen to have fallen in with the Bigfoot thing, and I think that Bigfoots are perhaps more accessible and more easily researched in some ways, like most things terrestrial versus aquatic. But yeah, I mean, I am interested in river monsters and stuff. In fact, I ran across river monster witnesses by Bigfooting. For the first time. So that's how I even stumbled across the subject. And I always knew lake monster, I knew Nessie and all that junk. I already knew that all this stuff was out there. But I mean, I just don't have time for it all. Bigfoot consumes my life, you know?
That's a huge part of it, because right now we're at a Bigfoot event and you're presenting. But
yeah.
So my next question is going to be, have we seen the last of Finding Bigfoot, or are they going to do more special events?
No, you've seen the last.
Is it done?
It is done.
It's done.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So for everybody out there who keeps on, because I've seen the Facebook messages of when are you bringing back the show, this is Cliff's confirmation that the show was done.
Yeah, it's done.
Okay. So then what's coming up in the future? What are you now working on?
I've got a lot of projects just beyond my Bigfoot research sort of stuff. I'm starting a podcast with Bobo.
Awesome.
I get a lot of requests. You and Bobo should do a show. And I said, well, we live in different places, and it takes a lot of funding and stuff. But really, podcasts don't take very much funding at all. And so Bobo and I are exploring that. We've already started accumulating content for it. We record once or twice a week. We probably about 7 or 8 hours of stuff stockpiled at this point. And we're kind of putting the final touches on our opening episode of Bigfoot and Beyond. Because obviously we're best known for Bigfoot stuff. We have the most experience in that subject, but we're also interested in other weird things like river monsters and lake monsters and Dogman and things that I don't even think are real, honestly.
I'm the Michigan investigator for the North American Dogman Project, so...
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are some of the things that I don't have very much information personally about, and frankly, I hope that dogmen aren't even real. But I know 2 excellent witnesses that say they've seen him at close range, and one of these guys is a very high-level federal law enforcement officer. But at the end of the day, they scare the hell out of me, and I kind of hope that dogmen aren't real, although there's something going on. I personally don't think they're flesh and blood, or maybe if they are, maybe it's temporary, because I don't know. Bigfoots are biological. I understand that. I wrap my head around it. But dogmen, there's something else about them that doesn't seem like they would fit in ecologically here. So I don't know. And I hope I'm right, because they scare me. I don't want them to be
as an investigator of them, people always ask me, like, okay, so how do I determine whether it's a Bigfoot that I saw or a dogman? Okay, Bigfoot, flat face, large butt. Dogman has ears, has a muzzle, has a long tail. Bigfoot, generally, if you've noticed the Bigfoot, they're like, okay, and they wander off into the woods. They don't care that you saw them, but they're going to go on their own way. If Dogman realizes that you've seen it, now you're a prey item and you're going to be hunted.
Again, I'm not interested in looking into that stuff. So
he's like, no.
Yeah, that kind of settles it.
It's like I don't want to be hunted by something that's 8 foot tall and can outrun me.
Yeah.
No. So now you had mentioned that you are opening up your own version of a Bigfoot museum.
Right, yeah, which is one of my other mini projects. I'm opening up a Bigfoot museum outside of Portland, Oregon. Technically, it's in a little town called Boring, Oregon, which is halfway between Portland and Mount Hood. I live on the slopes and the foothills of Mount Hood, in the woods out there, and it's not very far from my house. And the reason I'm opening it up is, well, severalfold. It sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a fun way to make scratch a meager living, basically. Dave Becerra down at Expedition Bigfoot in Georgia, or Lauren Coleman at the International Cryptozoology Museum. They've kind of set the bar, set a precedent, saying, yeah, you can do this. And other people too. Mike Rugg at the Bigfoot Discovery Museum in Santa Cruz. I can't remember this guy's name, but there's a really cool little museum in Somerset, I think, Pennsylvania. So there's all these little examples around the country that I'm kind of basing mine off of, but just trying to give my own flavor to it. I'm not trying to do it better. That's not what I'm about. I'm not a competitive guy.
Right.
They've already set the stage. Now it's my turn to show up and give it my flavor. And being an elementary school teacher, formerly before television, I think that I have a lot to offer in that regard.
Right.
Because I'm used to making like colorful infographics to convey information, and I certainly have more than my fair share of data at the house. I have like the second largest cast collection in the world, next to Dr. Meldrum. And it represents not only Sasquatches, but orang pendeks, orangutangs. I have almasty prints. I have captive prints. I've got a lot of prints from different unknown hominoids throughout the world. And that's just a small portion of what I have to offer, I think, as far as evidence goes. And really, Portland, we pride ourselves in being weird. Why is there not a Bigfoot museum there already?
Right.
So there's been talk, but no one's actually pulled the trigger, so it's my turn. I'm stepping up to the plate and swinging hard and going for the fences, I guess.
And I think you're the guy to do it because you've got the collection and you've got the background knowledge. So I think it'll be awesome.
I'm hoping I'm hoping that it can pay my bills, and it'll give me a place to work where I can continue really doing what I love, which is looking into Bigfoot stuff. And it's great don't get me wrong, it's wonderful to travel to places like Michigan, where we are now, or Virginia or Florida, and look into Bigfoot reports there. But at the end of the day, I live in Oregon. I live in the foothills of the Cascades. I'm most interested in learning about the behaviors and individuals of the Sasquatch population in my neighborhood, literally my neighborhood. And I think by opening this museum, that's going to open the floodgates of all the local information, and I think I'm going to be inundated with all that.
Cool. Now, I know you do a lot of research, and you were talking earlier, I think you were the one who was talking about like the different family groups. Have you noticed or come across evidence that the different family groups, if they interact with another group, pass on their knowledge of how they, like, for instance, researchers have noticed that the killer whales off of New Zealand have a very specific behavior for hunting because they hunt the manta rays and they have a certain process that they do it. The California area killer whales are sea lions and stuff like that, so they have a different method of hunting and catching their prey. Have you noticed that, like, behaviors that, like, with the mice that you were talking about that were wrapped up in the grass pods, do you notice more and more of that behavior being like, oh, we saw this on the West Coast, and now reports of it are showing up on the East Coast? Have you noticed that?
What you're talking about is a culture,
essentially. Yes, that's what I was just about to say. It's the cult.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's well known, it's been well documented that apes have culture. Okay, now Sasquatches aren't exactly apes, but they're not exactly people either. There's something else. They're hominins of some sort. And they certainly seem to show, there's some scant evidence at least that seems to indicate that they have some level of culture. And at the end of the day, it's not that miraculous. I mean, if we're going to say crows have culture.
Yes.
At the end of the day, culture is essentially knowledge that is passed down from one generation to another. And it's something
that's specific to that tribe or that group of animals.
Locality, yeah. And humans have it, of course. We pass down what you should and shouldn't do. Say excuse me after you burp and all that stuff. It's cultural issues. Now Sasquatches seem to have something like that, and I noticed that a long time ago, back in the late 90s probably, because like the Bigfoots in Bluff Creek, for example, probably the early 2000s. But the Bigfoots in Bluff Creek, for example, I've been Bigfooting at Bluff Creek a lot since 1994 when I started all this. And in all those many, many years, and we're talking weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of being out there, all that time I've heard one long distance vocalization. Just one. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of knocks. I've been grounded up close, had rocks thrown, you go down the list, found some footprints, but like at the end of the day, one long distance vocalization. But you go to another place, like Chinook Pass or somewhere, and then they yell all the time. All the time. And that just shows a slight behavioral difference that seems to be locationally driven, and that to me indicates some level of culture.
And that's really interesting and pretty cool. That they have different ways of doing things depending on where they're located at. And
well, it makes perfect sense. Like the places that have elk, like the
yes.
Olympic Peninsula, a lot of reports come out of the elk calving valleys. But in places that don't have elk, well, they're going to eat different things.
Right.
Like in Florida, they're going after the hogs and stuff like that, which is also a slight behavioral difference that indicates some level of culture about the habits here are different than the habits there. Right.
Yeah. So now, are there any other cryptids that you are interested in researching and finding out more evidence about?
Well, tangentially, I do like the lake monster, sea monster stuff because just from my dipping my toe into the pool briefly, there seems to be a lot of similarities, a lot of patterns that I haven't really heard talked about very much. I've read the Bernard Heuvelmann's books and stuff like that, like all the foundational books on the subject, and they attribute to 5 or 6 different species and all that, and I'm not there yet. As far as I can tell, all I've got so far is one species because, they're certainly not plesiosaurs, and they're certainly not
right.
because they don't come up for air enough.
Yeah.
And those are reptiles.
And what I found is when you're looking at the historical reports, you have to realize that most of the people who are coming over into the United States at that time, well, like when the first reports of the first European settlers were being made, they only had one term for a swimming reptile, and that was plesiosaur. So we've since, scientifically, there's hundreds of them, but everything was a plesiosaur, just like every whale was a whale until they, started noticing, differences. So everything was classified as a plesiosaur. If it fit that shape, it was a plesiosaur.
Yeah, I'm not sure when plesiosaurs were discovered, actually, but this can't be that as a thing. They
right.
can't be any of the swimming reptiles because they would notice them coming up for air often, and you just don't get that. They have to be some sort of like eel, fish sort of thing. And when I was in, Bobo and I were bigfooting on the Klamath River, I started stumbling across these, I was asked the natives up there, like the native folks, the Yuroks, and a lot of these Yuroks, they were called river Indians because they made a living on the river, they fished for a living, and they lived in houses on the side of the river. They had no cars. They got to their
right.
houses by
right.
boat, and they lived off the grid and all that other stuff, the most subsistence sort of living you would expect from a modern day Native American out there. And I said, you ever seen a Bigfoot? They go, nah. Heard one once, and although I saw one of those river serpents one time, I go, what, really? And after by that 4 days that we spent there, I came back with 3 or 5 stories about these things. And the pattern is that on good salmon years, they see them. On bad salmon years, and most years are bad on the Klamath nowadays because that run is going extinct, they don't see them.
Right.
And then they don't like them because they screw up their nets, they tear a hole in it, and the whole thing. And the descriptions are consistent, and they haven't seen them for about 10 years because the salmon haven't been around for 10 years, that sort of thing. Although the salmon have come back, and there was actually a sighting a few years after we were there. Yeah. And when you look at other places, whether it's the Queets River that has similar reports, or the Quinault, or any of these places, it's always tied to the salmon.
Yep, because predators follow the prey.
It's always in the same latitudes. Now go to the other side of the planet. Okay, so Scotland.
Yes.
It's not just Nessie. There's a couple others up there. They have salmon runs, and it's the same latitude. And ocean-going species like that tend to be more widely dispersed in certain climates as opposed to zones, perhaps. And I think what we're looking at is some sort of maybe deep-living eel sort of fish thing that follows the salmon up the rivers and hangs out in lakes, and sometimes they get landlocked in the lakes and they hang out and they somehow manage to breed. I could be very wrong, but again, I'm no expert, and I don't, I have a lot of learning to do in that regard. But that's kind of my take on it at this point.
Which is a very interesting and plausible theory on what some of these lake monsters are. For me, they fall into, when I'm doing my research into them, it falls into 5 different categories: plesiosaur, giant fish, sea serpent, as in a giant snake in the water, a giant turtle-like creature, and then there's the amalgamations, which I generally attribute to the Native American legends, like Lake Superior's Mitabichu, which is the great underwater panther. And Cliff's giving me this look like,
I don't know.
Wow!
I don't know. I haven't thought
This is awesome.
All the witnesses I've spoken to describe the same sort of thing. So I haven't spoken to the witnesses. There's a thing.
Yeah. And it also goes with like the historical reports when you're investigating the historical reports and they're giving the descriptions of what they've seen, they start falling into these 5 categories, and you're like, okay, something was going on.
Yeah. The historical reports, I think you probably have to take with a grain of salt, just because of the sheer number of discoveries, oceanic biological discoveries that have happened.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about like the various giant squid species or anything like that. And, and you look at these old maps that are even drawn like in the early 1800s, and they show all sorts of really fantastic beasts that we can now kind of identify in some way, or at least have some indication what they might be. Whether it's the stellar sea cow, which is extinct, or any other number of large sort of seagoing thingamabobs out there. So it would be interesting to kind of weed those out. In fact, there's a fantastic book. I bought it from a marine biologist friend of mine. She's the head of the, I think like the marine mammal department in Oregon. She's fantastic. She's also interested in various cryptids and stuff. So I bought her this book that it was sea monsters. I forget the title. It's basically sea monsters on old maps.
Okay.
And they look at all these things and they try to identify, and they'd say, well, this is what we think, and we have no idea, all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of an interesting book in that way.
Yeah, when I'm looking at historical reports, my hard and fast rule is anything before P.T. Barnum, I give more credence to, because people before then, they didn't want to be called, crazy or ridiculed or anything like that. If they were reporting something, it's because they were generally in fear of their lives or their livestock or their family or their neighbors. They were afraid that this thing was going to come kill them. After P.T. Barnum, there was lake monsters in every lake in Wisconsin, so it kind of becomes a tourist dollar thing. So that's generally my rule when I'm doing research. Anything before P.T. Barnum's time, I'll check into more. Anything afterwards, it's like, okay, I'll take the information and I'll check it against what other reports are in that region and see if there's a similar.
Yeah.
So
we did see something on Finding Bigfoot one time. Like, we were. It wasn't on camera, so it didn't happen on the show. No, probably would have anyway. But we were on Lake Kinzua in Pennsylvania. I think that's what it's called, Lake Kinzua or Kinzua in Pennsylvania. And it has legends of having one of these things living in it. And we were on this boat going to the other side of the lake for some shots that we had to film and stuff. And when we're going over there, like off to the side, like we look over there, and Bobo has really good eyes. He goes, "What's that?" He's also a commercial fisherman for a living, or was before the show. He goes, and we look over there, and I grew up fishing on the ocean and stuff. My first job was fishing tackle stores, and I worked in those from 16 to when I was 26 or 27. And I look over there, and about 300 yards off the side of the boat, there's this big wake being pushed on the lake, and it was a little choppy, but it wasn't that bad. But the thing that caught my eye were these fish jumping out. I think they were carp. They were about 3 feet long or so.
Silver carp are jumpers.
It's like,
yep.
But they were being chased by something underwater. I could see the waves being pushed by it, and about 6 or 8, 10 fish right in front of this thing trying to escape whatever was underwater that seemed to be pushing a huge wake at them. Not wake, because wakes, but then a surge as it went forward in the water. Bobo says he saw like a gray mass or some sort of thing underneath. I didn't see it myself, so I won't comment on that. But that was pretty cool. It was an interesting thing to see, as far as lake monster stuff goes. Like maybe that was one. I don't know. Another time I'm finding Bigfoot, it's not lake monster related, but when we were doing our investigation in Illinois, it was after our first night investigation out there. We came up empty-handed, so we were driving back to the hotel, which is like an hour and a half away or something, and and we're a caravan of 5 cars, or so, maybe 6, maybe 4, I don't know, something, I'll just say 5. And we're driving down the road, and Moneymaker was driving, and I was in the passenger seat, and it's very flat there, and like it was fields and dispersed forests and things in southern Illinois. We're driving, and off to the side, like on the edge of the headlight, I see what I think was a German Shepherd at first. It's like 2:30 in the morning, and it's kind of trotting towards the road, coming perpendicular to the road. And I go, Matt, check it out. Like, and then it turns, goes parallel to the road, and we pass it. But as we get closer, I realize it's not a German Shepherd at all. I thought it was a German Shepherd because it was like a dark gray color, really like charcoal dark gray. But as I got closer, I could see the long tail coming off it, and there's a black tip, even blacker tip on the tail, and the even blacker tips on the ears. And the way it was a mountain lion that was black. It was a black panther essentially. Now it wasn't a jaguar or anything like that melanistic. It was a melanistic mountain lion, is what it was, because I saw the markings that indicated it was in fact just a mountain lion, but it was black all over, and it was just a little bit blacker on the end of the ears and the tail and stuff. And Moneymaker saw it. I got a really good look at it. Adam Plosky, one of our camera guys and tech guys, he saw it as well. A couple of people in the cars. So we had a Black Panther sighting on Finding Bigfoot.
Yeah, you had. Hey, that's cool, because that essentially is actually a cryptid, because it's a creature that should not be in Illinois. It's everybody thinks those are southern. We have them in Michigan, so
you have them most places at Bigfoot's. Yeah. I get stories from all over the country about these things. And I guess besides that, I'm really interested in the other relict hominoids. The orangutandex, the almasties, the yeren, all that stuff. No matter what sort of hairy ape-like thing is walking around on 2 legs, I'm into it.
So, which leads into my next question: have you ever done research into, or wanted to do research into, like the sheep squatch and goat man?
No, that's fiction. That's
and those weird
mountain monsters. I heard they're wonderful people. I heard the show's very funny, but it's clearly fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can tell. Here's a test, okay? If you see anybody on television professing expertise in Bigfooting, look for their website and see what year it was founded.
Okay.
Okay, and that tells you everything you need to know.
Which leads into my next questions, which is awesome. And my next questions are, how do you, because you've done this for so many years, you've seen so much evidence, how do you determine hoaxers from the real thing?
It's hard, because some people are just bad communicators, so they seem like hoaxers. What I try to do, well, first of all, there's a couple different levels of information or evidence or data that might come to me. Story report, like sighting reports, I just kind of listen to them and take note. I have a database, an internal database. I don't make it public. Matt does a great job at that. I don't need to,
Right.
Like I've got my own internal database from sightings. Most of them are from Oregon, because everybody knows I live in Oregon, so I get a lot of stuff from there. And I just kind of add it to the database, unless it's really recent or close by my house, in which case I go check it out. If it's within 45 minutes of my house, I'll go out there. But for the most part, I said, all right, duly noted, and I add it to the database, because with enough statistical information, the hoaxers, they fade away, and the outliers that are bizarre and bad observations, they fade away as well. With enough data, enough statistical data, you can eliminate the hoaxers, so that it's negligent, essentially. Not negligent, neglectable, I suppose, is a better way to say it. As far as footprint casts, with footprint casts, I've been hoaxed a few times, and I fell for a while. London tracks are the best example. We even did an episode on London tracks where I was confident they were real. But at that point, because of the time demands from finding Bigfoot, I had not really gotten deep into the London tracks yet. And we got them, and then like 6 months later, we're doing an episode on it. It's like, well, I haven't really had time to do it, but I'll jump on it. I'll do it. Because at the time, I was convinced they were real. And then other things happened, and I started looking a little weird to me. And I was getting in deep with the data, with the London tracks, and then it occurred to me that there was these red flags, So I started investigating the red flags. I started doing experiments with fake stompers made for me by one of the guys who tried to hoax me on another track find, by my dad, who I called him up and said, hey, you don't happen to know anybody with a set of fake stompers I can borrow, do you? He goes, you know what, I'll make you a pair. And he did, and he let me borrow them for like a year. So I was running through the mud and making casts of these fake footprints that I was making. And as soon as I started doing that, I started seeing all of those red flags that I had concerns about in the London tracks. So I could reproduce that through experimentation, and that was it. You know, I did it a few more times just to make sure. Like, sure enough, London tracks are fake. So it's okay. Well, I got a little egg on my face, but I try not to think of it like that. I try to think of it more like a learning experience.
Yeah, a lesson learned.
Yeah, totally. And what learning about the London tracks has done, it has made the real Sasquatch tracks stand out all the more brightly against the background. Like now, I'm so much better equipped to come in and analyze footprint casts. And I'd always been hesitant before to make fake footprints and do experiments, because it's the same reason I don't own a monkey suit.
Right.
Because if I ever get footage, they're going to point and say, you own a monkey suit, that's fake.
Exactly.
You know, so I never bothered with the fake track thing because I didn't want to be accused, but it was a mistake. That is also a foolish thing I've done. I've done lots of mistakes in Bigfoot land, which is why I guess that I have so much experience at this point. You know, they say an expert is only a person who's made all the mistakes. So maybe I'm getting close to being an expert because I've sure made a ton of mistakes. But I should have been doing it all along because it could have helped me on several occasions. But yeah, so like with footprint tracks and stuff, I'm getting pretty good at looking for the things I need. And photographic evidence, you know, most of it you can kind of tell it just doesn't look quite right. But there are some very compelling photographs out there. And the best thing to do is get to the site and do some comparison shots and whatnot. But that doesn't always happen because sometimes, just recently a picture came to this guy I know, this friend of mine, and he's this woo kind of character, you know, and he asked me how to investigate it, so I told him, and he goes, I'm not really into gadgets. I'm just going to go there and I'm going to camp there, and if I get the vibe, I know it's real. That's, oh, for God's sake, don't do that. And it's such a shame because he's so adamant about it. He's convinced it's evil, which he can tell by looking at the picture, and then he's going to go camping there and just to see if it's real, because he'll know by feeling the vibe. So
could you, because I've heard the woo term several times, could you explain for the Bigfoot community what woo means?
Well, woo to me, woo means that I don't need the science. I want the experience.
Okay.
You know, like I experienced what well, let me back up. Woo is short for woo-woo, you know, kind of like paranormal, essentially, you know, and Sasquatches are not paranormal by any stretch of the imagination. They're perfectly normal animals. And I'm not saying that paranormal stuff doesn't exist. You know, I saw a UFO once. I don't know what it was. I had things that people consider ghost experience, and they're horrifying. And there's no biological explanation for those things. And I've experienced them. I know there's weird shit happening. You know, I don't know what your podcast rating is or whatever, but yeah.
It's on YouTube, so it's okay.
Yes, I know there's weird shit happening out there, but Bigfoot isn't one of them.
Right.
Bigfoot's a biological thing, as far as I can tell, based on my short 25 years of experience. Okay, I can only base it on my experience. That's not this, and maybe these people who have Bigfoot talking to them inside their head, I'm not even saying they're lying. A lot of them seem very compelling to me. I just don't think it's Bigfoot.
Right.
You know, because it turns out that a lot of these people, they come back with this message of like, you're screwing up the planet, it's time to be kind to one another, and all these kind of like sort of hippie-esque, you know, messages about fixing humanity. That's from the Bigfoot stuff. Turns out that's the same message that people get when they're abducted by aliens. Turns out that's the same message that people come back with when they have near-death experiences. Turns out that's what people come back with when they think that they talk to God or angels or any number of these sort of...
Or they've spent any time meditating in the woods and the vibration of trees and rocks and everything else.
Right. So if the message is the same, perhaps the messenger is the same.
Yes.
And so I started looking into this because I'm kind of poking around at trying to write some books, which is a lot more difficult than I ever thought it would be. But one of the books I'm writing is like the weird stuff that I don't think is Bigfoot related, or maybe it is, and let's try to find an explanation for it. And so I started interviewing a couple of witnesses, and one of these witnesses, he had one of these experiences, and he had voices in his head telling him things, the same sort of thing, you know, fix the planet, etc., like fix yourself up, things are screwed up. And he asked them, because this individual was reading, what's up, a Whitley Strieber communion at the time, where the people get abducted and stuff. And he asked these voices or whatever, "Are you alien? Are you an alien?" And he said, the voice laughed at him and said, "I'm alien to your world. Sure, I'm an alien. If that doesn't scare you, that's what I am." Okay. Well, think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
These people who say Bigfoots are talking to them inside their brain, they're already into Bigfoot. These people who think they're talking to angels, they're like hardcore religious people. So who's to say that whatever that is, poking at the membrane, like where it's the thinnest, it's like just approaching you in a way that doesn't make you scary.
Yeah, it's like when, like they say, be careful what you think, because thoughts become form and form becomes... Right. Yeah, so...
Yeah, so
it's
anyway,
along those lines.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for it. I mean, I'm just interested in strange things.
Yeah.
And that's how my interest in Bigfoot started as well. But the longer I did it, the more I realized Bigfoot is not one of those strange things. Bigfoot isn't one of these phenomenon that is unexplainable at this point. It's biology. Right. In fact, it's anthropology. Is what it is. Right. And I tried to make, I did my best to keep it as weird as possible, but it just didn't happen. But that doesn't mean my interest in weird things has stopped, which is why Bo and I are doing Bigfoot and beyond. Right. Because Bo is a weirdo too.
Yeah, because that opens up a whole universe of possibilities of topics. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and the reason I found Bigfoot, or probably more accurately, Bigfoot found me, the subject, is because I love weird things and weird people and eccentric thoughts and out of the box thinking and rebelistic, is that a word? Rebellious. There he goes.
Rebellious.
Rebellious ideas.
I know you're the school teacher now.
I make up words sometimes, but as long as you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you get the idea, So.
Yeah. So now my next question is, with all the new TV shows that are coming out and all these supposed experts, who do you suggest are the true experts in researching Bigfoot, that are actually doing the research, that they're not hoaxing, they're honest to goodness collecting evidence and posting their findings or talking about their findings, and they're not doctoring it up, they're not embellishing,
Well, first of all, I really don't think there are any Bigfoot experts. Now, I get billed that a lot, but I'm not a Bigfoot expert. I'm a learner. Okay. Like anyone else. I just happen to have more experience. Right. Because that's actually, I can quantify that. I have more experience. I've been to more places, been to more years than a lot of people, and etc. But perhaps I'll shift. I know what you're asking. You're basically like, who do I respect? Right. Is what you're asking. I have great respect for Dr. Jeff Meldrum. His work on footprint analysis and actually just anatomy in general. He is a professional anatomist. His PhD is in anatomy. Yes. And he cut his teeth. His master's stuff, if I remember right, was specifically on Australopithecine foot structure and bipedalism. Yes. So he's absolutely 100%, 120% qualified to be analyzing the Sasquatch stuff. And he also has the footprint cast collection, and he has found me. I'm very, very fortunate and humbled that he's found me to be certainly not his equal. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm kind of like I told Jeff that I'm kind of like his unofficial grad student. Okay. You know what I mean? Yep. Yeah, so he's kind of taken me under his wing, and because he knows all the Latin terms for this and that, and the tendons here and there, what the functions are, and I'm doing my best to catch up, because I love casts. I love the footprint casts. I love the hard evidence. So I keep my eye very closely on Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and I communicate with him as much as I can, reasonably and respectfully. Like whenever I get a new cast or if I have an issue, I just call him and ask him about it, and he's opened the door for me in that way. He respects me, even though I don't have an academic. I mean, I've got a degree in jazz guitar. He has a PhD in anatomy. Yes. But I tell him, dude, for you, this is your world, And he goes, well, for you too, Cliff. I go, well, yeah, but I got a degree in guitar. You have a PhD in anatomy. Right. He goes, yeah, don't undersell yourself. That's what he always tells me, and that means a lot to me, It actually, it's really moving for me. It's like he's always telling me, don't play yourself down. You're doing great, That's wonderful. So with a mentor like that, obviously I have a tremendous respect for him.
Yeah.
Other than that, the guys who really stand out to me, Thomas Shea from Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, he does great field work, and he's been doing it since '84, totally off the radar. Nobody practically knows even who he is. He's got a blog, and he writes down all this stuff. He has stacks and stacks and stacks of notebooks of these copious notes that he's been taking, and more footprint casts than I know of anybody else from one source. He's fantastic. A guy named Matt Pruitt out in Tennessee, one of the best Bigfoot researchers on the planet. He's so smart, and he's so into the field stuff. He did it professionally off the radar again for a year. He was a professionally paid Bigfooter for a year off the radar. Nobody knew what he was doing, you know. But a few of us did, but not very many. He's one of the best minds out there. He's played a great role in helping me bust a couple hoaxes. He's the guy that busted the LB hoax, for example.
Right.
He's helped me track some people down that I thought were unfindable. He's wonderful. Great Bigfoot researcher. Moneymaker's great. I mean, say what you like about him. I know some people find him abrasive because he is so strongly opinionated and everything. But man, there's no one I know who's better at finding a Bigfoot than that guy is. You give that guy a topo map and Google Earth and say, where should I look? And they'll give you 3 spots and one of them has a Bigfoot. He's very good at it. And no matter what people personally feel about him, he's very, very good at that stuff. Other than that, I mean, Derek Randall's this great off trail. He loves being in the woods and hiking. Like, when there's no trail there, that's where I want to go. I'm going to go that way until I can't anymore. And he'll go wherever it takes to go to a footprint. Yeah, so he's wonderful, and his friends as well. Like Shane Corson's really great as well off trail. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a small number. My circles are very small. Because when you're a public figure, everybody's clawing at you and pawing at you, trying to get your attention and trying to get like their experience validated by you, and that's caused me to recoil a lot. So I've been keeping my Bigfoot circles very, very small, you know.
Which is very understandable.
Yeah, I have to, because you know, it's hard to tell by either listening to me ramble on now or looking at me on TV. Or if you're in my classroom, but at the end of the day, I'm a quiet introvert. You know, I would be more than happy to go home and not say a word for 6 hours. You know, so the public figure side kind of gets under my skin, or it makes me uncomfortable sometimes. But so I try to keep my circles very small. But those are basically my go-to guys. I don't know if I'm probably missing somebody. I mean, I'd love to go squatching with Bobo and stuff, but he doesn't publish or anything. He just, you know, he's great for breaking the ice and getting in there with people and stuff. Everybody loves Bobo. I don't know if I'm sure I'm missing some people, and I'm sorry if anybody I'm missing is listening to this one.
In closing, tell me more about your websites and
I've got a million.
Promote them.
Yeah, I've got a million of them. And my personal website is cliffbarackman.com. Can't spell my last name. You just Google Cliff Bigfoot. It'll come up.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm social media out, you know, I've got Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and then we're starting to get the podcast stuff up and running, so we have all those various social medias for the podcast, which is Bigfoot and Beyond. So, you know, Facebook /Bigfoot and Beyond, or Twitter /Bigfoot and Beyond, like that sort of stuff, you know, Bigfoot and Beyond, you'll find it. We haven't even published the first one yet, so it'll be out probably within a month, and we'll start from there, and it'll grow. I'm sure people who care will hear about it. And then, of course, the North American Bigfoot Center, which is the museum's name, North American Bigfoot Center. You know, Facebook, North American Bigfoot Center, blah, 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 you know, all that stuff. So there's a website there. I'm spread pretty thin out there online, but it's all out there. I shouldn't be too hard to find. Certainly, it's easier to find me than a Sasquatch.
Well, probably.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you again for sitting down and talking to me, and I hope you have safe travels home.
Thanks.
And until next time, keep on squatching.
I've never stopped, never will.